Grand
Thank you, Cynthia.
Rising, Grand Rising.
Grand Rising.
Good thing we could make it today. This is a really special and really important day, and totally went over my head. Uh, Today is the Transfiguration. This is the day the Orthodox celebrate the Transfiguration of Jesus, and that is the day where he literally went from being a man on the ground to the light in the sky. So this is a really significant for the topic, I would say.
Amazing. And so what does that really mean?
Um, in practical terms, it's literally the point of evolution, the point of evolving from a lower state of consciousness to a higher state of consciousness. And this is
Okay,
something that
nice.
we are all experiencing together because on the cycle we just ended the mystic column on Sunday, and then on Friday we start it's a 10 galactic portal days, but I called it a 10 days of darkness. So this transfiguration is literally smack dab in the middle of two gigantic energetic portals, that one we've just come from and one we're getting ready to go to. And so this is the time when we are being transformed, like literally before of the people, for anyone who has eyes to see what's happening.
Yeah, it's been energetically the transformation has been very intense. I mean, it's been really for me personally, it's been going on for I would say probably the last year. It has intensified this year,
Yeah.
but it's like every month it's just building on top of each other in a very beautiful but also can be very intense way. But
Absolutely.
it's like everyone that I know that's like kind of tapped into the energy of this reality is really going through it in their own unique,
Hmm.
beautiful ways. While like other people I think are going through it as well, but I don't know, they're kind of just I guess they're just used to just whatever the routine is in some way.
Yeah, they're the river, and so this gets to the heart of the concept of the consensus of the nerd. So I'm just gonna go on a little rant here, tangent, about what this means. So I wrote a long thread talking about um Saul and how he was selected to be king and this whole process. And all of this came about because we asked the question, okay, well, how do you become the king? How do you become the priest? How is that done? And so when I just said, oh, well, I have to find an answer to this. And I know that the answer is in the Bible. And so right after that story that I told last time about the priest and all the wickedness he did and tearing down the tribe of Benjamin, then you have the story of Ruth, which is you know central to telling the feminine side of how Jesus came into this reality. And then right after that, you have this book of Samuel. In the regular Bible, it's First Samuel, but in the Orthodox Bible, it's First Kingdoms. And so Samuel was a prophet. He begged the people to worship the creator directly, okay? And the people demanded a king, right? They said, no, we don't want to worship the creator directly. We don't want that. We want a king. You see, everybody else has a king. We want a king too. So so Samuel was very, very upset by this because he said, is it that this doesn't seem right? There's a way these things are supposed to be done. And the creator told him, don't worry about it, I'm gonna give him a king. And so who does he pick to be the king? He picked someone from the tribe of Benjamin. Now remember, the other 11 brothers literally decimated that tribe down to nothing. And then those people who were left, because they didn't come to the battle, they were at the rock, they literally were just went into somebody's, now I know it's the Philistines, they went into the Philistines camp and basically stole some women who were there performing a specific ritual. And so Samuel was not only from the smallest tribe because they killed everybody, but he was most certainly a half breed. He was not a quote unquote full Israelite. And something else about Samuel is that he was tall. So the way the Bible works, like if you see something that just like a random detail that seems out of place, like he was tall. And then they go on to like intricately describe how much taller he was. You know, that's a very important detail to the culture. Like it's a cultural detail. And so I was like, he was tall. That's interesting. If I remember, because I'd already done some research on the whole David and Goliath story. And if I was like, if I remember, the Philistines were very tall. That's why no one wanted to fight them because they were so tall. And I remember that obviously from the VeggieTales version because, of course, my mind is on VeggieTales. But I was like, he was tall. I remember him being tall. And so that's how they chose Saul. They went, the creator in that story, when he had Samuel select Saul, went out of his way to pick somebody who they had to literally look up to because it wasn't good enough for these Israelites who were left to worship a God that was everything: the birds, the bees, the ground, the sky, the sun, the star. It wasn't good enough for these people. They wanted a physical king. So guess what? He gave them a king that they could look up to, physically look up to. And so the only reason that Saul was able to rule is because he was tall. He had the consensus of the quote unquote people because they literally had to look up to him. Of course he would be king. There was no one else that who there was he was they said he was literally a whole foot taller than the tallest person. Like he couldn't hide if he wanted to. So, and because he was a Philistine at this time, this is when the Israelites had to fight the Philistines because Saul is the one who was interacting with David. And so David is the one who actually went out and fought the Philistines. And it wasn't with Saul's help. It was because David was he had a whole nother set of things going on that made him the one who was going to be the king after Saul. So because Samuel then went on to say that David was going to be the king, after Saul, Saul then began to get jealous. And I didn't talk about this in my thread, but it's important to understand that Saul was ruling because he had the consensus of the nerd class. The people saw he was tall. If I'm a person who's basing my life, off this kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, he's tall. We have to look up to him. He probably should be king, based on these people being wicked because Samuel is the one who had to actually tell him. And when Samuel told Saul that he was going to be ruling, he actually ran away. He was like, nah, I'm not about to do this. He was hiding. Now, how you are a 7 foot tall, gigantic, man hiding like somewhere so people can't see you, I don't know, but he was literally hiding when Samuel went to actually crown him as a king. So then I had to go back. Okay, why Samuel? Why was he the one who was supposed to crown the king? Because the common thought is that the priests are the one who crowned the king, but it was Saul. That is because Samuel. It was Samuel who crowned it, and Samuel was not a priest. He was not from the tribe of Levi. He wasn't a priest. So why was it Samuel who crowned the king and not the priest? Well, the priests were wicked. We talked about that in the whole story of Judges. The priests were wicked, and so Samuel was the one to crown Saul because he was the chief nerd. And so we're looking for a solution saying, okay, we have to become priests. We have to become kings. How do we do this? No, 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 no. We have to become nerds. Like, we have to nerd all the way out to the nerdiest extent of being nerds as possible. We have to be so dedicated and so focused to our craft, our specific thing that makes us who we are, that we are innately tuned into, that when we see When we hear the word of the creator say, hey, it's that one, that's the one who's going to be crowned, we can go out and say, hey, it's that one. That's the one that's going to be crowned. Now, I have a story about this. I've absolutely never told this story because I refuse to tell it. But in 2022, I had a dream. And in my dream, I could hear all of the whole spirit realm was yelling, Trump, Trump, we want Trump. And I was like, no, I am not doing this. I'm not saying it out of my mouth. I'm not because I had standards, and my standard was, hey, if I have to be the one to be the prophet and come out and say this and give the whole rundown of the rest of the stuff, then I have standards. Number one, my number one thing was I'm not willing to have my friends and family mysteriously disappear like so many people who get in the way of Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's too dangerous for me. Number one. Number two, I have to have money. I'm not doing this broke. I'm not going to be a broke prophetess out here prophesying and giving people all this information and y'all can't figure out how to put a few dollars in my pocket. I refuse to do it. So since that time, and I don't regret it one bit because it wasn't for me to do. It wasn't for me to do because my standards weren't met. But that just established me as, listen, y'all got something y'all want me to get in front of the public and put out there that's controversial, that's political in nature. I don't care. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is doing it from this condition because the problem with the nerd class right now is that they are satisfied to work in squalor. This is something that has been done to us ever since what they did to Tesla. This is like the result of what they did to Tesla because Tesla, I don't necessarily think he was the inventor that everybody says he was. He was able to recreate the things that he was given. He was able to break them down. He understood them at a very deep soul level. But did he invent all of this stuff? I that's a step too far for me based on my own personal research. But he absolutely was a nerd because he could take all of this very complicated electrical information and turn it into things that were simple. He turned electricity into something that was so simple. What happened? JP Morgan, who was financing him, was like, okay, we about to make this money. And what did Tesla say? He said, nah, freely I have given and freely I will give. And JP Morgan said, get out the car. Get out. And what did they do? They continued on to discredit him, steal all of his stuff, every single invention that he invented, totally discredit him, and leave him penniless and broke on his deathbed. That's what they've done to the nerd class. That's not how it's supposed to go. Like I said in the last talk, the king, whoever the king is responsible for taking care of the nerds. That's the responsibility of the king. And they want that because the nerds are the ones who give the king the authority to rule. They give the king the authority to rule because the nerds are the ones who bring in the money. The priests don't bring in the money. The money doesn't come from the offerings of the people in the temple. That's not where the money of the kingdom come from. The money of the kingdom comes from the innovation of the nerds. And so if you don't have innovation of the nerd class, you have nothing. This is why America is falling apart. They had this country, instead of, it used to do things the right way, but right when they brought in this whole banking cartel and all this stuff, that's when they really put a quash on it and was like, no, we will not fund these people because the nerds will tell you the truth. They will come in the room and say, oh, this is wrong what y'all are doing. Oh, I don't do this whole child sacrifice, all of this stuff, all that stuff. Because in my research, and this is in my little thread, in my research, I discovered where this class of people is talked about, and it's in the very beginning. When the Bible says a mist came over the earth, the mist is the nerds, because the nerds are only responsible to the creator for one and natural law for two. A true nerd only answers to the one who created him and the natural laws. They don't respond to anything else. There's nothing else that is going to make the nerd class move. So this whole planet was covered with nerds. Like the educated, the prophets, the prophetess. whole planet was covered with them. And then, of course, when you get into the whole creation of Adam and all this stuff, that's when you get all of this other stuff happening. And so, being that the nerd class literally only answers to the creator and to natural law, these are people who can't be controlled. You can't control a person who won't answer to you. Now, I will, again, a nerd will allow a person to be a king, they'll allow a person to be a priest, but if that individual gets too out of hand, the nerd will, hey, the angels will just come and tell them, hey, you're gonna have to do something about that person. They're dot dot dot, and they'll come and expose them. There's a billion examples of this in the Bible. One of these examples is Daniel. Daniel, in the part of there's a story called the story of Susanna, which occurs in the very, it's called a prologue to Daniel. So in your regular Bible, it's not in there. You got to look for it online. In the Orthodox Bible, it's the prologue, so it's before chapter 1. And what happened in this particular story is that there was a woman named Susanna. And Susanna, she was married to the richest man in Babylon. So if you haven't read that book, The Richest Man in Babylon, I suggest you go read it. It's a really good book and it ties directly into the Bible. So she marries this guy and everything is going fine. But they have these two wicked priests who are also judges. So again, the priest should never be the judge ever. So these two priests, they who are the judges, they fall in love with this woman Susanna. They absolutely fall in love with her. And so what do? And now she's married to the richest man in town, who is the king, by the way, of Babylon. Because if you're the richest one, you're going to be the king. So she's married to the king. They treat him like a king. And these two weirdo priests fall in love with her. And they find out that they're both in love with her by accident because they're both being creeps and looking at them, looking at her while she walks around her private garden. Okay, and so they decide now they realize that these both of these creeps, these creepy old men like this woman. They decide, okay, we have to figure out how we're gonna get her. And so they make a pact. We're going to figure out how we're going to do it. So every day at the lunchtime, because that's when she took her walks in the garden by herself, they went to the garden to watch and see if they could get a chance to rape her. They're talking about literally figuring out when they could rape her. So they wait in the garden. A few months go by. All of a sudden, she sends all her servants out, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna bathe. You guys can all go." So here's their chance. These two creeps are waiting in the literally waiting on the sidelines. They see her undress and get in the water, and then they go and jump on her. And she's like, "Oh my god, she had no idea these guys were creeps. She had no idea that they were looking at her every single day, but she must have had a suspicion. So they say to her, "Okay, listen, you're going to have sex with us." Now, mind you, these are priests. These are priests who have taken a vow of celibacy. You are going to have sex with us, and also, you're not going to tell your husband. And she was like, or what y'all gonna do, or we're gonna tell him you was in here with somebody and he ran off. And she said, "I'll die before I do this with y'all." And she started screaming and the guy started yelling and the whole everybody comes in. And what happens? The priests come and they're like, "Yeah, we saw a guy in here, a young guy, and we couldn't catch him, but we caught her, and yeah, she's gonna have to be stoned." Now mind you, these two guys called for her to be stoned for something that they were going to do to her. And what happens? Everybody gathers up. They don't believe her story. She's telling them, "I didn't do this." Nobody's listening. They all get into a crowd because this is how these Israelites work. They all get into a crowd and the decision is made. And so she comes to the little court setting they have set up, covered in her veil, like she knows this is it. This is her last day. And so these guys are such huge creeps that they're like, take her veil off because they want to see her one last time before they stone her. These are some creepy guys, man. And so the crowd is standing there, and all of a sudden, the scripture says that the Holy Spirit was roused in Daniel. And I was like, roused? That's a really sexual term. Why would it use that? That's when this was like 2 years ago when I first started theorizing that the sun was feminine and he was quote unquote roused because it was a solar flare. And that's how the Holy Spirit communicated with the prophets, because we have a saying in our, one of the things that we say is that the Holy Spirit spoke through the prophets. That's in our the Nicene Creed. And so we say that every Sunday. So I always thought about that. What does that mean? It spoke through the prophets. What is that? So I theorized that it was solar flares that were the things that activated these particular individuals to speak. That is what was communicating with the people. So Daniel cries out and he's like, I am not going to have this woman's blood be on my hands. Did y'all haven't even done an investigation. Y'all didn't even ask no questions. And so the people were like, oh, the Holy Spirit, because I don't know what it is about the Israelites and these prophets, but they gotta think like if somebody is clearly filled with the Spirit, they stop everything, hold your horses, let's hear what this man had to say. And he was a young man at the time, and so um he separates the priest, puts one on each side, and he's like, he curses them out, like he literally cursed him. He said, "A wicked man, this and that." And so he asked him, under what tree did you see this thing happen? One of them said the cypress tree, one of them said the cedar tree. The people were astounded. Oh my gosh, they can't believe this. They lied. They couldn't believe that, again, these were priests, these were judges, and they lied. And so the thing that they meant for Susanna was done to them and they were killed. And I say, when I first read that story, how many women did they do that to? How many women did they do that to before it was found out that this is how they were? Had to be more than one, because think about it this way. If Susanna had slept with them, they would hold that against her when they wanted the king, her husband, to do something. They would say, hey, tell your husband to do this. Tell your husband we need this. Tell your husband this. Tell your husband that. And make sure he does it, because later on, Daniel is the last in the Orthodox Bible, is the last book before Matthew. So we know right after Daniel's story is done, we go into the New Testament where Jesus is coming. And the reason why John the Baptist was beheaded was because the daughter, the husband of the queen, convinced the husband to have John beheaded because she said that he was looking at the daughter or something weird, but I'm pretty sure the daughter was being molested. I don't know, it was some weird story, but it was the woman who convinced the husband to behead John the Baptist. So we know what happens in these scenarios. Like, these women get the trying to convince these kings to do this stuff, and they do it. They don't even think about it. They just do whatever the wives want, because they don't want to see the wife upset. They don't want to make the wives upset. They just do it. And so this is why you have to have the consensus of the nerds. Like, so Daniel in this story was the nerd. He was the one who was smart enough to know, hey, if these guys really saw what they saw, they will say they saw them under the same tree. This should be easy. He was the nerd. And I mean, the nerd in this scenario was not even like a super big brain like we are with the internet and all this stuff. It was very simple. Did both of these men see her under the same tree? It was really Solomon-esque. And of course, everyone knew the story of Solomon and his wisdom and all this stuff. And so it was very Solomon-like, that he would just, it would be such a simple answer. And so while we've been looking at, okay, I need to get into the position of the priest, I need to get into the position of the king. We wasn't called to be priests or kings. We were not necessary. Some people were, obviously, and they will be selected. They will be told, hey, this is your job. But guess what? If you're the priest or if you're the king, you cannot rule without the consensus of the nerds. So just one case of Daniel being roused by the Holy Spirit got those priests out of there. Not the king. The king was just following the priests. The priests were also the judges. So the king was not out of order. It was the priests who were out of order. And when Daniel called them out, they were done. And so what I say about America right now and this government, they're not ruling with the consensus of the nerds. This earthquake that happened in Russia was not an 8.8 earthquake. I've watched more than one person talk about this. It's not possible. If it were an 8.8 earthquake, you would have seen the tsunamis, but you didn't see no tsunami at all. And so they're fake nerds. So this is what the American government has done. They have a nerd class. These are the government workers. Because I've always been trying to figure out, what is the point of having all these government workers? What are these people? They are the court select, or the government selected nerds. They are the ones who the palace selects to be their palace nerds. However, none of these people are true nerds. Again, a true nerd only bows to two things: the creator and natural law. That's it. A true nerd will tell you to your face whether you're right or wrong. These government workers are not nerds, they're yes men. And so the American government is filled with yes men who are not telling anybody, the president, anybody, what is the right thing to do. And these people are paid off. A true nerd would never accept a bribe to lie. There's no amount of money in the story of Daniel you could have paid him to convince him to lie to those people. It wouldn't have happened, because he was not going to have the blood of an innocent, righteous woman on his hands. He knew the rest of Israel would. These were some blood. Remember, these were bloodthirsty people. They always looking to kill somebody. That's fun for them. Let's do a picnic. This is what they love. And so he wasn't content to be the one who had to pay the karma for that. He wasn't going to pay the karma for that. And so this is the hallmark of a true nerd. This is also why they didn't like Jesus. Jesus was a huge nerd. He was preaching and all this stuff, and telling them the gospel and explaining a lot of things to people. And who was mad? The priests, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. Why? They remembered what happened to those two priests who were judges in the story of Daniel. And as priests, Pharisees and Sadducees, the scribes, they would have written it down, because the scribes, whenever you, one of the things that they would do is, let's say you wanted your own personal copy of the scripture, you would go to a scribe, and the scribe would write it down. And so they knew these scriptures. They was very familiar with these scriptures. They knew what would happen to them if a Daniel arose. And so this is why they crucified the Christ. And what did they put on? Now, mind you, in the New Testament, Jesus never says, "I am the Christ, I'm the Savior, I'm this." He don't say. Has 7 "I am" statements, and none of them are "I am the Christ." The one I always talk about is where he says, "I am the vine and my Father is the husbandman." But he didn't say he was the Savior, the anything. He always would ask his folks, "Who do the people say that I am? Who do you say I am? Who do the scribes say that I am?" We know who the scribes say that he is. The scribes on the cross put a sign over him in 3 languages: Jesus, King of the Jews. Now, why would the scribes call him the king? The people didn't call him a king. The people weren't calling him King Jesus. That's not what they called him rabbi, which is teacher. So they weren't calling him king. The scribes were calling him king because they knew he was the king. They knew he was the king. And therefore, that's why they addressed him by his proper title. But he never said he was the king. That's not how that worked. He never did that. He wasn't trying to be the king of these people. He was trying to set a way so that they could do the right thing. Jesus is the one that turned the water into wine using advanced chemistry. Jesus is the one who had, 2 fish that was multiplied, 5 loaves of bread. That he did all of that with his intellect. Magic is intellect when it's done properly. And so you have the government trying to imitate this whole thing with their bureaucrats. But bureaucrats are not nerds. They don't do it just for the love of doing it. A true nerd can never be bought. So this earthquake that happened, and since it was over done, they said the whatever, it was too high. It wasn't. It was probably a 7.8, not an 8.8. There was no tsunami. It was no anything. But what were they trying to do? Well, they were trying to match this prophecy. See, because they had a prophecy from a prophet manga artist who said that in July of 2025 there was going to be a major earthquake. And so they did their little mumbo jumbo and they brought about this earthquake. This is what I'm saying. I believe that they triggered the earthquake so that they could fulfill that prophecy because of some other prophecy they're trying to fulfill. And so, as a result of that, now what's happening? All of these volcanoes are going on. So, let me talk about the volcanoes real quick. There's a volcano it's called Krasnikov, something like that. It hasn't gone off in 425 years. And they were saying, first I saw um all the reporting say, oh well, it hasn't gone off in 600 years, 500 years, 400 years. I'm like, so when did this thing go off last? Because they don't even have their numbers right. And so, as usual, nobody went and did the research, but like the true nerd that I am, I went and pulled it up. So this earthquake, that particular, the Krasnikov, I didn't even write it down. That volcano last went off in 1550. And then before that, it went off in 1350. And before that, it went off in 850, then 750, then 650. So from the time of Christ, the very first time this volcano went off was the year 650. And in the year 650, the Khazar Khaganate had begun. This is when those Khazarians chose to be Jewish because they didn't want to fall under the kingdom of the Muslims or the caliphate of the Muslims or the kingdom of the Christians. So they chose a Khaganate, which is some word that they made up. They weren't supposed to do that. They weren't allowed to be Jews. There were already Jews. They weren't allowed to be Jews. But this is what they did in 650. And as a result of their choice, that volcano went off. That was a warning unto them. So they've got in their mind, they know when that volcano goes off, that specific one, that it is talking to the Khazars. Okay? So in 750, what happened? You had the caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate, ended. And a caliphate, like I said, is an empire. And the Umayyad Caliphate was specifically a caliphate that was run by people who were not ethnic Muslims. They were not ethnically related to that site. So that tells me they were Khazars probably. And so what happened after the Umayyad Caliphate is those Khazars went into Spain and Portugal. So that was another warning to them. Hey, stop it. You cannot involve yourselves in all the religions. Well, what happened next? In 850, so 650, 100 years later, 750, 100 years later, 850. In 850, and this is why they didn't have another one for a long time, there was a queen. Her name was Ingelberga, and she basically cut them off. Like, she negotiated with the Pope, and the Pope hated her, but her husband was quite powerful. So she negotiated with the Pope to free a lot of people. And so that stopped them from doing all this expansion because what? The feminine energy had come into some power. And she actually is the one who set basically the start throughout that Middle Ages part from 850 up to 1350, where the wives of the kings started basically their own religious orders. So they all had monasteries, but the female monasteries. So this is the start of the women taking care of the spiritual women who were in the community and bringing them into one place. And it's kind of like a patronage system. This started the patronage system for the monasteries by these wealthy women. So guess what? The volcano did not go off again until 1350. So from 850, that's almost 500 years, to 1350, there was no problem. Okay? What happened in 1350? The Black Death. All of these quote unquote Khazar people had moved all into Europe. They was taking over Europe. So a illness, much like 2020, came along and wiped out 50 million of them. 50 million people died from the Black Death. Now, you would think if 50 million of you got removed in a few years, you might say, let me not mess with the creator. Let me let the creator do what he's going to do, and I'm going to stay out of his business. That's not what happened. In 1550, the volcano went off again. What happened? In 1550, they had the Council of Trent. In the Council of, well, first of all, 1550 is when the Jesuits were established by Pope Julius. That's number one. This was done as a part of the Council of Trent. What happened at the Council of Trent and why this earthquake, this volcano has not gone off since then? At the Council of Trent, that is when they established the Latin Mass for the Catholic Church. Now, if you don't know anything about the Catholics, this is a big deal for them. The Latin Mass was in use all the way until about 50 or 60 years ago, right about the time Israel was given its own state. They used the Latin Mass, and the whole schism right now in the Roman Catholic Church is that the young people want to go back to the Latin Mass, and as part of the Latin Mass, there's some prayers called the Leonine prayers, and the Leonine prayers are prayers that protect you from being demonically possessed. And this was a common part of the prayer. So this is why you had no earthquakes. I mean, not no earthquakes, but this volcano didn't go off from 1550 until today. So why did it start going off a few days ago, right after that quote unquote 8.8 earthquake? Well, they lost the consensus of the nerds because we have been on here saying, no, they're not doing what they're supposed to. This is not right. We don't agree. We don't consent. And our individual and collective lack of consent, it was like, oh, these people set off a earthquake that was supposed to fulfill a prophecy. Let's show them a prophecy. Now they got something played out. They can't control it. They had another. So in the last month, there have been 4 earthquakes that hit New York. All 3 point something earthquakes. They're not supposed to get earthquakes. Like, this is a big, huge. This problem is so big that they might actually come to us and ask for help. I mean, it would be the right thing to do. But again, we're not going to do it if they can't do the right thing. I personally, me, myself, have to see that the right thing is being done. And no, it's not, oh, well, we've been putting mercury in the flu vaccines, so we're going to take the mercury out of the flu vaccines, but we're going to ban them first. Or, oh, well, those mRNA vaccines, they might not be so good, so we're just going to like ban them. That's not good enough. The nerds need cash. Period, point blank, in the story. We want to be left alone again to worship our creator in spirit and truth and do our work. If they can't agree to let the nerd class work in peace, they're not going to get any peace. I've been saying that, but I'm saying it again. If they can't allow the nerd class to work in peace, we have work to do. We have advances that need to be made, that could be made really quickly, extremely quickly. Until they allow us to do what we got to do, we don't have to be bothered with these people. We could just let them deal with the creator directly. See, because the nerd class is the intercessor. Samuel was the intercessor for Israel. Israel was wicked as a mother, man. They was doing all kinds of stuff they wasn't supposed to do. Samuel was the intercessor. And what happened? Samuel said, the people, they want a king. That's what you have here. You have the reverse. In America, the nerd class is saying, we don't want a king. No, they did a whole protest. It was called No Kings. We don't want a king. We don't need a king. What we need is to be left alone and do our work. Well, in order for us to be left alone and do our work, somebody has got, see, because we're the mist. But remember, there's still the rivers, the lakes, the streams, and the oceans of people who have to be managed. And it's not that the nerd class can't be king, because that's not even the case. There's lots of prophets who were kings, like Nahum. Like that's not the problem. The problem is We cannot do anything that needs to be done without resources. We can't do anything that needs to be done without freedom of speech. So they tried in this country to establish a safe haven for the nerds. That's why this country has a cancer a son. Cancer is the mother. They established this country under the guidance and the rulership of the feminine energy. And then they proceeded to chip at it and chip at it and chip at it until we have what we have today, where you have a bunch of fake nerds telling the real nerds that what we're saying is wrong. And when we say, no, what y'all doing is wrong and y'all are lying and I'm not going to be a part of that, they try to just take you out like they did Tesla. So this is the current like state of what's going on. We don't need more kings. We don't need more priests. We need more nerds.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was magnificent. Wow. You really you just you go on a roll.
I'm sorry. I
No,
just
it's
because
great.
I
It's
can't
great.
believe
Yes.
this is unbelievable to me. It's amazing. Like we were always good enough. We were always doing the right things. We were always in the right place at the right time. These people just they squashed it. They did everything they could to bring us down to a point. I mean, how do you give children vaccines with mercury in it, knowing it causes mild retardation? You know it's going to make them retarded, and yet you give it to them. I mean, the lengths that they've gone to suppress the nerds. It's amazing there's any nerds left, and yet a nerd class has arisen. And like again, the people that I watch for the earthquake forecasting, Dutch Sense, he can forecast earthquakes. Like he knows when they're gonna come. He can tell you where they're gonna come. He can tell you within an amplitude or whatever it is how strong it's gonna be. And he's got this whole system totally duplicatable. The government could use it right now to tell where the earthquakes are going to be. Have they called him? Have they said to him, yeah, you got some great. He said he discovered a deep volcano in the Arctic Circle. And they were on the internet laughing at him in 2012. And then one of their nerds that they approved said that they discovered this super volcano and named it after themselves. Meanwhile, this guy was on the internet in 2012 saying there's a super volcano right there. He made a joke about it. I don't find it to be funny. They know who the nerds are. They got all of our birth charts. They've watched us and tested us in school. They know exactly who we are. And they go out of their way to make us look stupid. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. It is insane. That's exactly what they've done. They have with a if they know that the nerds are not going to bow down to their idiocy, to their pure bullshit, they just have these drones that just
Yep.
follow. I mean, a great example is archaeology. And I think Graham
Mm-mm.
Hancock has done a great job of exposing just how much of a sham the mainstream archaeology is. Where you look at something like the pyramids or like the Sphinx, and you see clear water erosion that
Right.
that must have been there for at least a couple hundred years. And the mainstream archaeologists, they can't explain it. You know, they say, "Oh, it was just slaves that built the pyramids." And so, what's as you're saying, what's been happening is as the flow of information has improved dramatically, and as I guess the the grip of this order has basically been destroyed, the nerds are that have been doing their work for their whole lifetime, they're finally now gaining legitimacy because it's almost like the system can't restrain them or hold them back anymore. And as a result, now the nerd, through their tireless work and energy, and they didn't do this, as you said, they didn't do this to make money. They didn't do this for the cloud. They didn't do this for influence. They did it because that is what they were, as you said with the guy, what was he was aroused. right? Aroused to
Right,
do.
yeah, aroused. Daniel,
Yeah,
yeah. I
that's
was
the
like, that is
nerds.
such a weird. It's such a
Well,
weird
because
term to
you can't
use.
help yourself, right? You can't help, like,
Yep, you can't help it.
as you
Mm-mm.
were saying in the last conversation that we had, it's like all this research you have to do, but it's like, well, you're still gonna do it. You know, it's like the nerd has the compulsion where the nerd might be going through so much challenges in the physical, but they are aroused to do as they are called to do. A drone
Right,
cannot do that. A drone is just like, oh, tell me what to do.
right.
Wow. Wow. So, and it's interesting because there has been, as you said, a concerted effort to destroy the nerd class. And really, what we should be doing now is, oh, I mean, really, what we should have been doing the whole time, but even now more than ever, it is extremely important to befriend, support, and help the nerds. Because I've seen it time and time again throughout my life. The nerds are like outcasted. They're belittled, they're ignored, they're put down, they're not cool. And when you are able to give them your time, give them your love, give them your energy, and also show them, wow, you're doing amazing work. Like, show them appreciation and gratitude for what they are have been aroused to do. They love it. They feel empowered, they feel loved, and as a result, you basically start to build your army of nerds. Now, they don't have to obviously follow you around and they don't have to support you necessarily, but I think now more than ever, it's very important to hit up your local nerds and gas them the fuck up.
I mean, yeah, if you want to, if this country is going to advance, which again, I'm not certain that's the case because these people are still pretending to have power that they don't have. Like somebody needs to come out from the USGS and say we made a mistake on that earthquake. It because now everybody's saying, "Oh, it was an 8.8 earthquake. It was right before 888. It's an 8.8 earthquake." It's like people not even thinking about it. I've heard so many astrologers like say this without even just repeating the fact, oh, the volcanoes are going off and this volcano hasn't gone off in 600 years. And it's like, did you even look? Like I never say anything. Like I don't even like repeating what other people say until I at least go and look and see if what the person said is true. That's how we found out. It wasn't that long. It was 450 years. 400 I think 445 years. It wasn't 600 years. But why are they saying 600 years? Why is everything being so confused? It's like, "Oh, they're planning on controlling this whole rollout of whatever they think is coming because remember, well, maybe not remember. I shouldn't say remember to y'all. Project Looking Glass was I've mentioned on my channel many times. Project Looking Glass was they had the heads of probably black women and they were in a jar. And so they had their demons because your DNA holds the future. It holds the past. It holds everything, especially black women who have the quote unquote Eve gene. So they had our women's heads in a jar, body parts and all kinds of stuff. I'll say something about that next too. They had all our body parts in a jar. And so their Project Looking Glass was literally tapping into the DNA of the individual they had in a jar and using it to prophesy like false prophets. Again, not using the nerd in the living state, but using the nerd in the dead state. Unacceptable. So they knew what was going to happen all the way up until like 2012. And then in 2012, the thing stopped. It stopped working for them. That's when they started to disclose it. So like I know a lot of people aren't like old enough to remember around that time, but that's when they started to disclose this program they were doing. Why? Because they couldn't get that thing to talk anymore. And they were trying to figure out if somebody that was already connected to the government could fix it. And obviously, they didn't find anyone to fix it. What ended up happening was, in my opinion, is the demons just started lying to them and telling them, oh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Oh, Trump's going to lose. All you have to do is this. So they started lying to them. This is why Hillary never got over the fact that she lost because she was told by her gods, her demons, her all the entities that she worked with that she was going to win, and it didn't work. Another thing is, if you guys, you should really look into what the teraphim is. The teraphim is that little box that these Khazars wear on their head when they go to do their prayers. And if you looked at what is in this box, because I was like, how much are those things? Why do they cost so much? What is going on with that? I looked into it. It is a synthetic device for connecting with the Holy Spirit. It's a synthetic device that contains hair, nails, teeth, bits of bone, whatever of the people, especially black people, who are able to connect with the Holy Spirit. Just people in general who can connect with the Holy Spirit, they carry around bits and pieces of it in that thing. That's why they cost so much. Like, I did that on a totally separate research point, but it just speaks to the power of the bones, even your bones, even dead, you have extreme value. That's why, what was it, another scandal that came out? They were harvesting body parts from people who weren't even going to be dead. They were killing people to harvest their body parts for other people. And you would think, okay, that's weird enough. But then, like I just said, what was Project Looking Glass? What are the teraphims? This is what they do. They literally take the bones of the best and the bright. What do they do with Tesla's bones? Oh, well, he was cremated. He died and he didn't get no autopsy, so we don't really know what he died from, and then he was cremated. What do you think they do with that stuff? Like, if there's no one to come and claim the bodies of people, how many homeless people die and what happens to their bodies? What do they do with that? I know one thing, when I gave birth, 3 times I've given birth, I asked for my placenta every single time. They wouldn't give it to me. Now I know for a fact they sold it, used it for stem cell research, all kinds of stuff. Where's my money from that? Why are they stealing, again, body parts from people and not allowing them, and then not even cutting them in on what they stole? Like, this system is so wicked that it's not going to be like, oh, we'll just give this nerd a few dollars here and let's give this nerd some recognition. No. We need a total top to bottom clean out, along with an acceptance, a public recognition of the wickedness that has been done. And not covertly in the background. We're not really going to talk about it. We're just going to fix the. No. None of that. Just like when Daniel went in front of the crowd of all the Israelites, all of Israel, all the 12 tribes, men, women, and children was all gathered around when he exposed those 2 priests. That's what we need. In some circles, they call them public tribunals. Some people call them the public executions. We need all of that. Not no Nuremberg. No. We need public exposure. Everybody has to know, so this thing can't be repeated. This scenario keeps happening over and over and over again. And I don't think it's really happening over and over and over again. Honestly, I think this is their only try to get this like this, because remember I said in our last conversation, we have 432,000 years of history that's missing. So I think this is the only time they've been able to get a solution, because it says in Revelation that the Antichrist or Satan would be released for a short time. I think this is the short time Satan was released, but then he was put back in his cage because we put him back in his cage. He had to go because of all the stuff that had been done. When we released the saints, you can't have the saints and the Satan and the devil can't occupy the same space. So Satan had to move when the angels was released. That's just how it works. And so you have all of these people who believe how many people think that the mRNA was actually good for them? Now you have today RFK coming out and saying, well, it might not have been so good. The risks outweigh the benefits. No, that's not good enough. People need to be compensated for the loss of life that they've had. This has to be made right. Admitting you were wrong is not the same as This is why I don't like reparations. Like, as a black person, I don't want no reparations. Give me restitutions. Restitution is making it right. Reparation is, oh, I'm sorry, here's a consolation prize. I don't want a consolation prize. First of all, my family was never slaves, so I don't even qualify for that. But I don't want a consolation prize. I want to be made whole. I want to be restored back to my previous state. And energetically, for the ones who are energetically like awakened, that's what's happening. We're being restored to our previous energetic state. I think it's about 2010 that people's energy are being restored to. Don't give me the line, because I don't know what's happening to people who weren't even born in 2010. But I think 2010 is the energy that we're going back into. As an older, slightly older person, I feel a lot of big 2010 energy. And I've talked to some other people. This is kind of it feels about right. Like, okay, yeah, this is what was going on in 2010. So that's what happened. Like, before their quote unquote end of the world that they falsely predicted in 2012. Before the okay, so if you've seen the show Supernatural, it was so weird because they went through the whole Armageddon, they got all the way to the end, and then they went back to the time before Armageddon. Like, that's when I had to stop watching, because I was like, what happened? Like, they went back to before Armageddon. And now, mind you, Supernatural is my show. Like, I got 7 seasons on DVD. Like, they went back to before Armageddon. They just went back in time and like played the whole thing out again and didn't make the mistake of the last time. That's what this energy feels like. And this has never been done. But why was it foreshadowed on a show called Supernatural? I mean, your guess is good as mine, but that's the way that the energy feels.
Yeah, it seems like for sure God gave the wicked free reign for whoever knows how long, and they tried, the wicked really tried, but it's like right now what we're seeing, it's like they've built their own grave, and it's collapsing within themselves, and they were too powerful in terms of they don't know how to get out of it. And
Right.
it's like they're trying to maintain the structure from collapsing, but it's already collapsed to a degree where you're just kind of wasting your time trying to hold it together. Like it's too expensive, it consumes too much energy. Like it's done. It's done. It's done. But they can't accept the fact that it's over. Like they cannot comprehend it. Why? Because they were riding so high for so long. And that's what God does. That's the fall from grace. Is they
Yep.
think that they are the rulers. They think that they are the most powerful and the most potent because they got the money, they got the control of government, they got the companies, they got all this, and it's just to bring them up to the highest heights and then to just destroy them, because that fucking hurts. Like that there's very little suffering as painful as having it all and just letting it slip away. I mean, it's destroyed. It's all of it. Like a great example is climate change. How many
Mm.
decades have they spent? How many
God.
trillions of dollars have they spent pushing climate change? Europe is basically like choking on climate change regulations. And the United States, the people, the nerds of the United States have said, no, no, what is this
Right.
bullshit? We're not doing it. And they've tried and they've tried and they've tried, and it's if you feel the energy of climate change, it's dead. It's dead. And
Yep.
they're trying to bring it back up. They're, oh, look at the tsunami, the explosion, the volcano, the earthquake, the world's heating up. Nobody gives a shit. The only ones that care are the fucking drones. And the drones have no power.
And not only the data doesn't support that. Like, they're crying out, the world is heating up, the world is heating up, but people are like, but we just had winter. Or like, if you look in Australia right now, which is in the opposite energy of us, they're having like freak snowstorms, and they just had some weird snow, what do they call it, some weird snow event happened in Italy, and Italy shouldn't even be having snow right now. So it doesn't even add up to what's happening. And there's a story in the Bible that describes going to this height and then this like fall, not just the one I said about those two priests, but in the story of Esther. Her cousin Haman, no, Mordecai was her cousin, and Mordecai had this whole big issue with Haman, who was the king's second in command. And basically, Haman just was like, okay, I don't like those people. They need to all die. But Esther never told them what her nationality was because, again, she was probably mixed. So they didn't really, they just said, oh, well, she looks like us. It's no problem. Or and I always call it passing. So she was probably passing, and they were like, okay, well, she looks like us, there's no problem. Meanwhile, she got her cousin there who's little old Mordecai, a VeggieTales version. And it's like he's like, don't say anything, you might need to, you might need to have this as a secret for some reason. And so, long story short, Haman decides he wants to kill all of the Jews. Esther goes to the king and is like, like, you're gonna kill me tomorrow. And he was like, the king said, what? I'm gonna do what? He said, yeah, Haman had you sign an order to kill all the Jews, and I'm a Jew. Haman, his family, everybody he knew was murdered in the same gallows they had set. He had built the gallows to kill all these Jews. They was killed in the gallows. So this is what you're saying is correct. This is how the creator works. He give you your space to operate. And see, the nerds understand that because you can observe this in so many stories. Like, you can see it over and over and over again that you just don't want to be a part of that. I always say to people, I don't need to learn a lesson by experiencing it. If I see someone else do something that it looks stupid and they get stupid, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, I don't have to do that for myself. I've learned through them. Look, I'm not even asking the question. I'm sitting back and saying, I'm not getting involved. If you walk over there and everybody who walks over there gets eaten by an alligator, I don't need to walk over there. Go ahead, have your fun, walk over there. I'm not walking over there because I know everybody who walks over there gets eaten by an alligator. Like, that's how nerds are. They can just observe and say, everyone who does, like, okay, a great example of this right now is a lot of people, they're not taking Ozempic, but they're taking like GLP-1s, which is the primary ingredient in Ozempic. But I've seen enough of these celebrities taking the Ozempic having these weird problems and all these weird side effects that I'm like, why would I take the main ingredient, similar to, I think, something like that, of Ozempic when I see what Ozempic is doing to these people? Why not figure out what the actual problem is with me, my metabolism, or whatever the case may be, my eating habits, my exercise, whatever? And yeah, it might take a little bit longer, but at least I won't end up like those people because something's wrong with them. They're never going to have their full health back because I saw a girl, she ended up in the hospital for a week for trying to lose the weight too fast and all this stuff. I'm good. I'll be a little chubby until things come together and I can get it off naturally. I don't need to fast track weight loss, especially I didn't put it on fast. So let me lose it as fast as I put it on. That was makes sense to me. But a lot of people out here, especially people who are not nerds, so we do have to think about, as the nerd class, we do have to think about what happens to the people that aren't nerds, because everybody knows the little um meme where you have the super stupid people. They always do the same things as the nerds. Like, even though they're super stupid, they can still observe reality. And so them and the nerds, the extremes are always on the same page. It's the people in the middle that think that they're smart that are never doing the right thing. These are the ones that are the problem. Again, these fake nerds, I call them, they're imitators, they're imposters. They just think that they're smart because someone told them they were smart. And if you challenge them at all, they short circuit. Like, even if they answer you, they can't even believe you had the gall, the unmitigated gall to even ask the question. Now, mind you, these people, something's wrong with them. And you could, like, there's a guy I follow, does a lot of research, and I'm sure he knows a lot. But it's something wrong with him because of several guys, and I said that several of them, there's something wrong because they don't seem to understand that everything is not numbers. A lot of, okay, this is like a telltale sign. People who say numbers don't lie. That is the biggest lie I've ever heard. First of all, where did zero even come from? Like, have you done an investigation into numbers? Show me where zero is. Like, zero's not even a real number. Like, it's not even a real number. And if you say that to somebody who bases everything off numbers, they look at you like you've lost your mind. What do you mean it's not a real number? I can write it. I'm like, yeah, but it's not actually a real number. Like, it doesn't have a place. And so, how can you argue with people who have built their entire reality off a number that never existed before like 100 years ago, or maybe 1,000 years ago? I mean, it haven't been around that long. It's not a real number. And I read somewhere that India is the place that gave a zero, which makes a lot of sense. And it's like, okay, you mean to tell me you people who hate those brown people, I mean all brown people, but especially those brown people, y'all just took their word for it? Okay, I'm gonna let y'all have it, because how can you argue with somebody who haven't even done a basic investigation into something as simple as where did zero come from? But you're a mathematician, but you're a statistician. You don't even know where zero came from. You don't even have an understanding of what zero is. And that's what you're quoting. That's what you're citing all day, every day, is these numbers. And no, the AI can't explain it to you. No, another professor who is also a pseudo nerd cannot, a pseudo intellectual, I usually call them, they can't explain it to you because they never did the investigation for themselves. But when you realize that as a nerd, there's no separation between you and the creator, the concept of zero doesn't make sense, because you are the creator and the creator is in you. That's what Jesus said. I am my Father and my Father is in me. And when you see me, know assuredly that you've seen the Father. So where's zero? Where is there a space? There's no room for a space. There's no room for a space. And so if you are the type of person who understands that, and a person who reads the Bible, again, one of these people who's on the lower end of the spectrum, they can read that in the Bible and just say, yeah, I am I am my creator and my creator is in me, and they go about their life living like that, and there's no problem. A person on the high end, they read that, I am my creator is in me, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And they go on about their business. It's this weird group of people in the middle who are like, no, God is out there and I'm here. No, God is down there and I'm up here. No, there is no God. I created myself. Like, these are these weird people. Like, what do you do with the people that's like that? So I don't have a solution to that problem, but that's something as the nerd class, like, we have to think about. That group of people is why you need a priest and you need a king to manage that group of people. But the person who's the priest or the king has to be righteous enough to let the nerds and the top half and the top 2% and the bottom 2% go on and do their thing unperturbed. They got to manage the middle, and I don't want to manage. And I said this a long time ago. I don't want to be the king because I don't want to manage those people. Something's wrong with them, and I don't have the good people skills to not tell them to their face that they're stupid. I'm the one who in 2009 and 10, I was in the entertainment industry working with all these rappers, big tall dudes like 2 feet taller than me, telling them their music sucks and they need to get out and run around. They need to get in the gym because their breathing was horrible. That's me. So you don't want to put me in front of those nerds. Someone's going to try to take me out, or they're going to self delete, because I don't have no filter when it comes to things that I'm an expert at. And I'm not going to put one on just to be palatable to the masses of people who have no functioning Like their brain cells don't function, but they think they do. Like they're literally just channeling demons. Meanwhile, they think that they have a brain cell that's functioning. Absolutely not. You don't. I mean, and you could tell that to them, but they would just look at you like, what do you mean my brain cells aren't functioning? I'm standing here. I'm like, yeah, that's not your brain. That's your body that knows how to operate itself without you. Because if your body needed you to operate, I don't think it would turn out too well. So we need priests and kings, you know. It just don't have to be us. We are outside of that system. And we have to act like it. So that's why I bring it up. Like we have to act like we're not a part of that system. There is a large group of people who need to be governed, and they need to be governed by the righteous. But with those people governing the righteous, being governed by the righteous, whoever this righteous person is that's going to govern them also has to treat the nerd class and the bottom class with respect and let us do our thing and leave us alone. Take the advances that we bring to society, and what's supposed to happen is if you get a patronage from the king, you're supposed to go back to the king with whatever it is, and you give it to the king to again engage in commerce, because as the nerd class, we don't have time to be doing commerce. That's let you get your little government people to do that. Like we got to be over here creating. Creators create, so we got to be over here creating. So you take your little government class and y'all do your little palace workers, okay, and y'all sell whatever it is we bring in here and make it look good. But the system is again, it's totally out of alignment. They're doing this in a total opposite way, because the goal of the system as it stands is to basically convert the entirety of everybody, the nerds, the lower people, and everybody in the middle, convert them all into workers, the slave class. And so you can't have a nerd in the slave class. It doesn't work like that. So that's why most of the people who are in the nerd class, or the prophet class, I should call it, but I like nerd. The ones in the nerd class are unmanageable. So are the ones at the bottom. They're unmanageable. And so what they've done is they've just demonized them. So that's why you have all these homeless people out here who are probably in the bottom, 1 to 2%. And then you also have a bunch of people who are like in the nerd class that are homeless, that are just out there. And then you have them like trying to drug themselves to numb the pain from knowing they're not where they're supposed to be. They don't have what they're supposed to have. I mean, this is what I've been complaining about for like years now. Like, I know where I'm supposed to be. And the fact that I'm not there is a function of this weird middle class, and also these weird leaders, these unrighteous leaders, and their ability to manipulate time in a way that is actually harming the whole class of the nerds. And so I again have been petitioning the creator. No, I'm going to worship the creator. And so all of this pushback on that has been for me and people like me to say, okay, no, we'll take whatever you give us. Just take me out of this situation. And what have I said? I don't care what you do. I refuse to worship the wicked. I won't do it. I won't work with the wicked. I won't worship the wicked. I won't comply. I don't consent. That's my favorite. I don't consent to this. And so enough of us have stood up and said that we don't consent, that yes, their system is crumbling. But because we are the intellectuals, we have to be thinking what's going to happen when the system does crumble. How are people going to be taken care of? And so that's why when I canceled the dumb diverses, I said the magic that's running the system, that affects people's day-to-day lives, let that stay in place. But everything else that's not benefiting the people on the day-to-day, let that be destroyed. That was something I put in what I said because I had thought about this. A lot of spiritual people, especially, they want the system to be destroyed. But if you destroy the system, what is going to happen to the people? Number one, we built this system. The nerd class built this system. So, of course, the stupid middle class wants the system to be destroyed because they can't build shit. And so they'll let what we built with our blood, sweat, and tears be destroyed because they could never rebuild it. And so what will happen? Total anarchy. That's unacceptable to me. Not having clean water, not having air conditioning, not having lights, that's unacceptable to me. And so I won't allow those. So it's like I'm fighting this, you know, these the overlords on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm fighting the middle class, because the middle, again, the ones in the middle, they just want destruction. Oh, let this whole system just crumble. And I say, why would you want that? What's going to replace it? Oh, I don't know. You mean to tell me you haven't even thought about it? You want the system to crumble, and you haven't even thought about what's going to happen next? That's nuts. And so it's like it's a very difficult thing to be in this position, but we are strong enough and we are tough enough to do it. I just need everybody to be on board. Like, everybody needs to be contributing to this with their energy. Like, not saying that the system continues on in the same form that it is, but that the system continues on for the ones who are living. Like, we cannot have the system collapse for souls that are still here. Um, People need to go to the hospital. Like, there's just, we cannot have the system collapse for people who are still here, because I'm telling you, everybody else, everybody in the middle, the whole 75% or whatever that's in the middle, is just rooting for everything to fall apart. I see it every day. It's really strange to me, but we have to be. I mean, I think part of it is, me and my friend, we just been talking about this stuff so much, and I don't see anybody else talking about it in this format, like putting it all together like this, in a cohesive manner, in a story that can be told. And so, this platform is giving me an opportunity to voice this to a different group of people than the ones who are lurking on my channel on YouTube, really hate me, but know that they can't get any other truth from anywhere else. They're obviously like lying about my numbers. People are somehow watching, and I'm not getting I don't know all the different things that they're doing, but I know that there's nobody else that I can find that's actually putting this stuff in a cohesive story with examples that are simple enough for people to understand, and has some kind of a solution. Which is, the system is a system that we built. We don't need to destroy the system. We don't need a new system. We need new people. We just need the people to do the will of the nerds. That's it. If they just did what we wanted, it would be no problem. And again, you do see that going in that direction, but it's not going fast enough. I expected it to be different by now. Um, I expected it to be different by now. And could it have been done faster? Absolutely. And it's not good. It's just not good enough. That's another thing. Nerds have very high standards, perfection standards. I could have seen this played out a bunch. It's been a lot of unforced errors, like unforced errors, and ground being lost that didn't even need to be lost. Like, not acknowledging Juneteenth it made no sense. Like, as if black people aren't important. Like, you can't do that. Like, you just can't do that. Unforced error, the Epstein stuff, unforced errors, just over and not getting rid of these people fast enough. It's been a number of unforced errors. The whole rollout of the tariffs, unforced error from the beginning. That was never rolled out properly. Whoever war planned that is not a real intellectual. I don't care what people say about Stephen Miller. He is not a real intellectual. He's 50%. They need 100% intellectual in there, and I don't see any. I see one. They got one of the guys that I follow that talks about the logistics part in there. But that's it. I don't see any of the real intellectuals being nominated for justices for courts. I don't see any of the real intellectuals being brought into the FBI, CIA, DOJ, any of that. I don't see any of the real researchers being brought into NOAA or any of the science. I don't see any of the real intellectuals. All they're bringing in is a bunch of pseudo intellectuals who maybe know some intellectuals, but we need the real intellectuals to be brought in, not these people who can just be confirmed, the people who really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean the system wants loyalists, so that's what Trump is focused on is getting people that are loyal to him, which is just it's a sign of his weakness, it's a sign of the system's weakness that
Yeah.
they're not able to give the nerds the position of power so that they deserve to have. So obviously they got to put in the fucking retards that are just going to be
Right.
loyal and not actually focus on what's better for the country. But and I think that's really what has slowed everything down. Although I will say it's picking up, but I think the slowdown is just that it's all these power players fighting between each other as well as
Right.
against the trend of what's going on to maintain this very, very complex, expensive system.
Right.
And they're gonna fight tooth and nail. And as you see with like the earthquake, I mean they're so desperate. They're so desperate to
Mhm.
maintain these rituals and maintain this facade that hey guys, like the prophecies are happening. It's all
Right.
working out well. No, don't doubt it. Don't fear it. Everything is good. Meanwhile, everything is in a state of complete, total, utter chaos. And those who have been following their wicked ways, like they're just blowing up.
Right.
Like they're internally, their life is just being destroyed from the inside out. We haven't seen the physical effects yet,
No.
but internally they're being destroyed. And as they're being destroyed internally, they're going to start to see their physical shift overnight, whether that is divorce, losing their money, losing their properties, losing their businesses. I mean, it's going to be complete, total chaos because they didn't shift when they were supposed to shift. They kept fighting on, they kept holding on, and now it's going to be ripped from them.
Right.
And this is going to be like the avalanche of abundance that is going to be given to the nerds for sure, because obviously the nerds have been, whether it's physical benefits or not, the nerds continue to do what they were aroused to do. Um, Now, I think maybe for the next talk, because I'm just wondering, like, how do we support the nerds? Like,
Mm.
how do we, moving forward as we are now, at least as now that I am aware of the power of the nerds, and as you mentioned in this talk, like how important they are to the success really of this new system, because we're
Right.
we're entering into a new system. So now it's okay, it's the nerds. We have to support the nerds, embrace being a nerd, empower the nerds, love the nerds. So I guess maybe the next talk that we can have is more specific about like how does a system where the nerds are being honored, cherished, and supported, how does that look like?
Mm. That's a good question. That'll give me something to research. That's a really good question. I don't even know because I don't think we've seen it in thousands of years.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Yeah, they've been. I mean, it always reminds me of like high school in the cafeteria. And you had like at least my high school, pretty small high school. We had like the popular kids table, the trying to be popular kids table, the middle curve trying to be popular but are failures table, and then of all the different tables, boom, in the it was always like in the corner. It
Right.
was the nerd outcasts because it was always like either you had to hide being a nerd. The thing is, having good grades doesn't even make you a good nerd. There's
Right.
a being a nerd is a specific type of way of doing things where even if it's like even if it makes you an outcast, you can't help but just do it. And and
Right.
and in that table, it was always the outcast. And I remember like for me, I've always been a lone wolf, so I didn't give a fuck about the popular kids. It was like I didn't understand why people were so enslaved by the popular kids, why they were so gung ho about trying to be popular. And I always sat with the weirdos, with the nerds.
Right.
Because out of all the people, at least in my high school, that I knew, and in anywhere really, the most fascinating ones have always been the nerds. Everyone else is so vapid. They're so fucking boring. They're so shallow. There's just they don't have like any depthness to them. And I think we
Right.
have to go back to that. We have to go back to this, like, embracing the nerds, sitting at the table with the nerds, eating
Mm,
with the nerds, sharing with the
that's
nerds,
interesting.
bringing them out, being friends with them. Where are the nerds? They're not on these dating apps. They're not. I mean, sure, they're on social media, but like, we got to bring them out because they've been hiding because they've
Well,
probably
they've
been
been
under
forced into
intense
hiding.
attack. Right. Right.
Right, forced into hiding. So I'll give you my high school example, which is totally different. I went to a very large high school. My graduating class was 500 students. I think our high school had about 2,500 students, and the high school I went to actually had a special program for. It's called Science and Technology program. So you had to test in order to get into the program. And then if you were in the program, you actually went to special classes, like a bunch of AP classes. You weren't in the classes with the regular people. Now, mind you, my high school that I went to was in the middle of the hood. So you had literal like regular kids who were just like lived in the neighborhood mixed in with our school also had ESOL, which is English as a second language. So you had a bunch of those people mixed in, and then we had a extremely good basketball team. So then you had people who kind of moved so that they could come to school for that, and then you had people who were in this science and technology program. And so me, I was multi-talented. So in in high school, I wasn't in like just these classes that were advanced classes. I was in about 9 different organizations. And so wherever I went, including the choir, which was basically most people in the choir were all the neighborhood people. So I could move from group to group without really having an issue because I spent so much time with such a wide variety of people. So um I was in a nerd class. The nerd group was my group because we were all in these AP classes, these extremely difficult classes, and all of that. But I could easily, because one thing we did in high school was play cards. We played spades. Actually, I could grab one of my friends and we would go play like spades with some of the neighborhood kids. Very dangerous, which I mean, I'm just so naive about how dangerous all this stuff was. But we would just go play cards with them. I never played for money, but they was playing for money, and I was like, oh, well, I guess we better win this game. But it was all kinds of stuff going on, so I never had a problem moving from group to group and feeling comfortable wherever I was. And what I noticed about the nerd group is that that's what's necessary. It's not so much that the people need to come to the nerds. The nerds need to go to the people. They need to go into the spaces of these quote unquote pop. So the popular people at my school were the smartest people, mostly because, or the people who were like cheerleaders and stuff like that. But the people who were doing that kind of stuff, cheerleading and all of that, your grades had to be a certain level. So they love to have the super smart kids doing the cheerleading because they never had to worry about their grades. It was the local kids who sometimes couldn't keep their grades up and then they couldn't be in cheerleading. They couldn't play basketball. They couldn't play football. It was that kind of scenario. So I was in a situation where the nerds were the most popular people in school. We were the ones running the school. And I went to undergraduate with a couple people who I actually went to high school with. And when I talked to them about their experience in high school, their experience was totally different. They were like, we never hang out with any of the regular kids and this and that. And I was like, Dad, what was different about me is because I was in the choir. I was in a bunch of different I made it and I made a concerted effort to reach out to people who were different than me, to see if I could find out if we had things in common because I was poor. So even though most of the people who were in the nerd class were rich, like that's, you don't really get to be a nerd as a poor person. Not back in the day, I guess, but now it's like it's not as different. But back in the day, no, you had to be, you had to have some money in order to be in the nerd class, because you had to be able to take these tests, you had to be able to, learn all this stuff. But I was, again, it's in me, it's not on me. I didn't have to take a bunch of classes to learn how to be a nerd. That's literally just who I am. And so because I knew it was in me, I was like, well, and I had, popular people who were like my friends in at church and stuff like that. I just went and hung out with everybody. And a lot of people didn't like me, but they didn't like me because I was weird. And I didn't even realize how weird I was, because I thought they were weird. Because I was like, that's not even who they are as a person. Like, I thought that was unusual, that they weren't on the outside who they were on the inside. And they spent more time obsessing over looks and stuff like that than stuff that really mattered. So I think it behooves the nerds to come out of hiding. Like, that's what we need. We need to encourage the nerd class to come out of hiding, and the nerds have to be bold enough to come out of hiding, and then also like go out and meet people. So even though my YouTube channel is not super huge, I still have 3 years of videos rambling on and on about this stuff, and I never cared if I got 1 view or 100 views or no views. It didn't matter to me, because it wasn't about me getting views. It was about connecting with the people who understood what I was talking about, who could confirm they were seeing what I was seeing. So a lot of this is the self-confidence of the nerd class has to be built up. And I think that is not going to be super difficult, because there's been so many television shows like The Big Bang Theory, or my favorite show, Leverage, or just in general shows that show the nerds being different, but still being able to maintain some kind of popularity, like being popular. Like, look at Elon Musk. Like, who would ever think that he would be a popular person? But he got that, he's got all these women pregnant and all this weird stuff, and it's because of money. So that's another thing. The nerd class would be way more confident if they had money. So my hope is that the nerd class just gets inundated with money. Like, money will build your confidence faster than anything else, literally. And so that's what we need. The nerd class needs an infusion of money.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this was a great talk for sure. Thank you so much. This was very important in terms of laying the groundwork in terms
Yeah.
of having an understanding of what it takes, which really is like we gotta support the nerds, both
Yep.
energetically, materially, financially, spiritually, like whatever ways we can do. We send them that love so that they can have the confidence to come out, and maybe they already, I mean, they, a lot of them obviously are already out. It's just
Right.
like it's like removing the censorship that has befallen the nerds, because obviously the system has not been very kind in pushing the nerds out there in many
No. And a
different
lot of them
ways.
are anonymous too. We need people to come out in their real face, in their real voice, and be who they really are.
Nice, great, I love it. So yeah, we'll talk on Friday about kind of, I think you kind of did a good segue in terms of, okay, now we know that the nerds are really important. How do
How do we
we
support them?
support that? Yeah.
What does this nerd society look like? I have
Mm,
no idea. So we'll talk about that on Friday.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week.